Holy Gospel, according to John, the first chapter. The next day, Jesus decided to go to Galilee. He found Philip and said to him, "Follow me." Now Philip was from Bethsaida, the city of Andrew and Peter. Philip found Nathanael and said to him, "We have found him of whom Moses in the law and also the prophets wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph." Nathanael said to him, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" Philip said to him, "Come and see." Jesus saw Nathanael coming toward him and said of him, "Behold, an Israelite indeed, in whom there is no deceit." Nathanael said to him, "How do you know me?" Jesus answered him, "Before Philip called you, when you were under the fig tree, I saw you." Nathanael answered him, "Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel." Jesus answered him, "Because I said to you, I saw you under the fig tree, do you believe? You will see greater things than these." And Jesus said to him, "Truly, truly, I say to you, you will see heaven opened, and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man." The Gospel of the Lord. The Gospel today is from the Gospel of John, the first chapter. And in it we learn about the very beginning of the public ministry of Jesus Christ, when he's calling some of his early disciples who became some of those 12 apostles. Very early, shortly after Jesus was baptized, and then shortly after he returned from being tempted by Satan in the wilderness. Now this says the next day. So what John does in the first part of his gospel is he uses days to separate and to kind of chronologically sequence events that happen. The next day, the day after, the third day. Don't know if those are actual 24-hour days or periods of time, but he uses those to sequence the events. So the next day is a series of days that take place at and just after John the Baptist continues to testify that Jesus is the Messiah. He is the Christ. So the next day, Jesus decided to go to Galilee. Now Galilee, a land area in the northern area where a lot of the Israelites live, bordered on the west by the Mediterranean Sea. Galilee land area has the Sea of Galilee. Now Jesus was born in the south, in the area of Judea. Born in Bethlehem. Spent some time there, some time in Egypt, and then his family moved to Nazareth. That's a town in the north, in the land area of Galilee, 25 miles southeast of the Sea of Galilee. So Jesus was called a Nazarene, or Jesus from Nazareth. That's where he grew up. So to begin his public ministry, he traveled south and was baptized in the Jordan River by John, tempted in the wilderness, and now he begins his public ministry, but he's in the south. He wants to go to Galilee, which means he's still in the area of Judea, around Jerusalem, someplace like that. But yet he's meeting these people who are going to follow him. So he says the next day, Jesus decided to go to Galilee. He found Philip and said to him, "Follow me." Now Philip was from Bethsaida, the city of Andrew and Peter. Bethsaida is a town or a city in the northern area. If you look at the Sea of Galilee in the northern area where the Israelites lived, if you go to the north of it and maybe a little bit east, you're in the area of Bethsaida. We have a Bethesda, Maryland, which was probably named after Bethsaida. I think Bethsaida means house of fishing or house of fish. It was an area from which a lot of fishermen ventured into the Sea of Galilee. So Philip was from there, and said Andrew was there, and Peter was there. or from there. But yet they ended up living in Capernaum, which is on the northwest side of the Sea of Galilee, and there were more than likely fishermen there. At least some of them were fishermen there. If they were from the northern area, what were they doing in the south? Many of them were following John the Baptist. They were disciples of John the Baptist, the great prophet who led the way, paved the way for Christ. In fact, John's testimony about Jesus even called some of these disciples to stop following John and to begin to follow Jesus. So Jesus is in the southern area. He's meeting up and calling people to be his disciples who are actually from the northern area. So he finds Philip. And Philip found a man named Nathanael. And he said to Nathanael, "We have found him, of whom Moses in the law and also the prophets wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph." So first, Jesus finds Philip. Then Philip finds Nathanael. A lot of finding going on. Jesus found Philip. Jesus looks for disciples. He looks for us. He doesn't hide from us. He never did. He never will. It is the style of Jesus to search and seek us out. And what did Philip do? He found somebody else. He talked about Jesus. One of the great differences, among many, but one of the great differences between the Old Testament and the beginning of the New Testament is that in the Old Testament, God always intended the Israelite nation, the Israelites, to be a light to the Gentiles, to go throughout the world and share the relationship and the Lord they had and the relationship with the Lord. But they tended not to do that. They tended to be insular, kind of kept God a secret, kept him to themselves. But if you look throughout the New Testament, these people who now meet Jesus and become followers of Jesus, first thing to do is they go out and tell somebody. They are adhering to the Great Commission before Jesus gives the Great Commission in the last part of the Gospel of Matthew. Philip didn't want to keep Jesus Christ a secret. He wanted to tell somebody. That's what we should do. So this story here that seems a kind of a simple story is rich in teaching for us. It's rich in symbolism. It's rich in faith. So Philip finds this guy named Nathanael. We found him of whom Moses and the law and also the prophets wrote. Whenever somebody at that time talked about law and the law or Moses and the prophets, something like that, it was a shorthand reference to the entirety of the Scriptures, which today we call the Old Testament. Moses wrote about him, the prophets wrote about him, and he named him Jesus of Nazareth. I don't believe the word Nazareth shows up in the Old Testament. But Jesus was from there, so that's a way to identify Jesus, although he was born in Bethlehem. And that's where the Messiah was prophesied to be born. But they said Jesus of Nazareth, and they call him the son of Joseph. We think of Jesus as being the son of Mary and the adopted son of Joseph. But people back then were known in relation to their father. So it's natural to say Jesus of Nazareth to distinguish this Jesus from other Jesuses and to refer to him as the son of Joseph. Nathanael says back to Philip, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" Obviously there's a little prejudice going on there. In those days, the Israelites lived in the south, looked down their noses at the Israelites that lived in the north. Galilee was the north. But even within the area of Galilee, it looks like the Galileans looked down their noses at Nazareth. Now, Nathanael was probably from Cana, a town 8, 9, 10 miles away from Nazareth. Maybe those were rival towns. Maybe their high schools played each other in whatever games they played back then. Maybe they were hated rivals. But this does show a prejudice against Nazareth. Nazareth was a small town. As a small town, couldn't be expected to do great things. Nazareth was probably about the size of rural retreat. That's 2,000 people then. It's much larger today. But maybe Nazareth back then was the New Jersey of today. People always deride New Jersey. Can anything good come out of Jersey? Has anything good come out of Jersey since Frank Sinatra? So Nathanael asked the question. Now, who is Nathanael? Nathanael is believed to be one of the 12 apostles, but they're not really sure which one. They think, well, maybe he's Bartholomew. Maybe he's Thomas. And there's a case to be made for either one of them. But I think especially that Nathanael is one and the same as Bartholomew. And there are several reasons. It's fascinating. Because if you look at the Gospel of John, Nathanael's mentioned, not Bartholomew. If you look in the Synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, Bartholomew is mentioned, but not Nathanael. Maybe one and the same. Philip is apparently associated with both of them. And very importantly, very interestingly, Bartholomew. That's not a given name. That's a description of the guy. You see, Bartholomew means son of. Tholomew or Tholomea. Son, Bar. Simon Bar Jonah. Simon, son of Jonah. Bartholomew is a description of whose son he is. If that's a description, he probably has another name, and his name may be Nathanael. Some people believe that Nathanael of Cana is the one at whose wedding was the site of the first miracle of Jesus Christ, who turned the water into wine. I guess that would be fitting. So Nathanael says, can anything good come out of Nazareth? Does Philip argue with him? Does he debate with him? No. No. He teaches us today a lesson on how we share faith. We talk about our faith, we talk about God, we talk about our church. Then all we have to do is, after that, is say, come and see. Come and see. That's what Philip said. Come and see. That's a complete sentence in our English language because the you is understood. He said, come and see. There are two verbs. Come, enter, look around, see, listen, hear, feel. Come and see. And Nathanael accepted the invitation because it says, then Jesus saw Nathanael coming toward him, and he said of Nathanael, behold, an Israelite indeed, in whom there is no deceit. That is a mighty strange greeting. It's a little different from, hey, how you doing? An Israelite in whom there is no deceit? What a strange way to greet somebody. Nathanael said, how do you know me? Now that's a compliment. It's better to be called, behold, the liar. But in whom there is no deceit. Why would Jesus bring that up? Because he was saying in the heart of Nathanael, he was not a man of guile and trickery and treachery. What you saw is what you got. He was not going to deceive you. But why would Jesus say that? Maybe because this is a time of contrast. Talked about the Israelites who kept God to themselves and the disciples who shared God with others. Here's another comparison and a contrast. There was deceit in some of the Israelites at the beginning. And there was deceit in the Israelites at that time. The deceit you found in the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the scribes and the lawyers at that time. They were full of treachery and deceit. But you can go all the way back to a man named Jacob. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, whose name was changed to Israel. And sometimes the term house of Jacob means house of Israel, the nation of Israel. Jacob was a deceitful man. As a young fella, he deceived his father. He ripped off his brother, got that inheritance. So maybe we're talking about a new Israel and an old Israel here. An old nation, new nation. The new nation, the new covenant in Jesus Christ. The covenant in his blood. So maybe he's comparing him to Jacob. If Jacob received the promises and blessings of God as a deceitful man, how much more would Nathanael receive? So when Nathanael said, how do you know me? Jesus said, before Philip called you, when you were under the fig tree, I saw you. Now, in this situation, obviously, it was impossible for a human being to see Nathanael under whatever fig tree he was under. It might have been hills or mountains or forests in the way. Because it was such a stunning statement. Nathanael answered him, Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel. Because Jesus could not possibly have seen Nathanael. He could only see him because of supernatural power. Supernatural power probably meant the power from God or the power of God. So he cried out. He cried out with two statements. Almost as if one says, you are God, and not only that, you are the King of Israel. Two titles. You are God, and you are the King of Israel, Messiah. Under the fig tree. It's important symbolism in that. Under the fig tree meant a place of safety and security and serenity. A place where people would go and meditate. A place where people would go and pray. Under the fig tree. They feel safe. They pray to God. They would contemplate the things of life under the fig tree. And that's where Philip was. So it was probably a time of prayer and meditation. Maybe, just maybe, Nathanael was praying to God about the Christ. When he would come, who he would be. And maybe, just maybe, when Philip says we know who the Christ is, and Philip had been meditating on the Christ, and then Jesus says, I saw you under the fig tree, Nathanael is quickly putting two and two together and getting four. So Jesus answered Nathanael when he said, you're the Son of God, you're the King of Israel. Jesus answered him, he said, because I said to you, I saw you under the fig tree, do you believe? Now, did Nathanael understand everything there was to know about God and but Jesus Christ the Savior? No. No, but he believed him to be the Christ. Then Jesus said, you will see greater things than these. Greater things than just supernatural eyesight. He said, truly, truly, solemn statement by Christ, truly, truly, I say to you, you will see heaven opened, and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man. That is a reference to the Old Testament. It's a reference back to Jacob. Because you see, Jacob had a vision one time, and in the vision he saw angels ascending a ladder into heaven and descending the ladder from heaven to earth. Now the ladder is no longer there. They're ascending and descending on the Son of Man. Jesus Christ has become the ladder. He's become the path to heaven. He's become the bridge between heaven and earth and heaven. The angels taking the petitions to heaven and coming back with the answers. And maybe, just maybe, Nathanael was meditating on the Christ. And maybe even this Jacob's ladder, this passage from the Scriptures about the angels ascending and descending. Jesus is that ladder. He is the bridge. So this is a story about beginnings. But useful beginnings, because we are taught by Philip that we are to share the good news of the gospel. We're not to argue. We're to say simply, come and see. And we're to trust. And we are to believe. And we are to share that belief in others. In the name of God. Amen.